Hello and welcome to the Total Entertainment Podcast with me, Paul Collis, and today we're going to be taking a look at Simply Red. Now, what can I tell you? Well, there's a lot going on today. It's a relatively large show, but it doesn't look like it's a large show. The reason for this is it's an 8-truck show with 3 tour buses, and it doesn't look on the inside that it's an 8-truck show. There's a lot of stuff hidden within the rig. So sound-wise, you've got line arrays which are double spanned and quite deep. You got a set of flying subs behind the main line array, and a little bit further down you have the line array pointing 45 degrees outwards to give it the surround sound effect. In the pit there are a handful of subs which have been placed underneath the stage. The stage itself is quite shallow, but there's a lot going on upstage behind the backing drape, which is 4 smaller white drapes that are in columns going from the grid right down to the bottom. And on these 4 columns of white drape you have projection screens, and the projections coming front of house from the mixer at the other end of the arena. So powerful projectors to pull that off. There's only 2 projectors front of house, so map stage left with 1 projector and stage right with the other projector. Either side of the stage you have thin side screens, which are just slightly wider than the column drapes, which are centre stage, and they're being back projected from the wings either side of the stage. And yet again, those have been mapped so they can alter the images and focus directly onto the screens themselves without no overspill. The stage itself is looking pretty empty. You've got not much at the back of the stage or the sides or even downstage. You've got a nice riser right in the middle of the stage which spans 2/3 of the stage in total, where every member of the band is positioned, and the band just evenly spaced out on this mid-stage riser. So it will look pretty good actually. I reckon it will look really good. Above stage you've got a hell of a lot of ladder trusses which are going over the stage as though it's a grid, just like you did on the UB40 show. And you have a front of house bar which is going to provide front light, which is going to produce the front light, and I doubt there'll be any lights dedicated into the audience. Today is a seated event, so once the mojo is finished being put in, the last of the seats will go in, and I've been told that it's a sold out performance. So it's going to be very, very good to see another fully seated gig, and this has been cancelled and cancelled and cancelled, and now it's actually going ahead. You're going to have a lot of eager fans who have been waiting to finally see this show. We are expecting a bit of a dropout because of the last cancellation where Mick Hucknall had COVID, so some people just won't be able to get time off of work with the show being performed on a Monday. We'll be back after this. So not only does Monster X Media have a series of podcasts, but we also have a series of books. The first book is actually 2 books, it's Volume 1 and Volume 2, of a tribute to working at sea. The best fiction is based on truth. This is a compilation of short stories, rants and poems loosely based on the author's experience at working on a cruise ship. Some of these stories are based on actual events but highly exaggerated, whilst other stories are pure fiction. The title of the book, A Tribute To, is fitting with the tone of the book because, like a tribute act, it is a blatant altered reality where you can enjoy it knowing it's not quite the truth. There are things with alcoholism which used to be highly prevalent within workers in the cruise industry, as well as stories with a sexual nature. So sit down, relax, and enjoy the ride of A Tribute to Working at Sea Volumes 1 and 2. All of these books are available on Amazon and are available in paperback and on Kindle, and the links for all these books are in the description below. Simply Red are a soul and pop band formed in Manchester in 1985. The lead vocalist of the band is singer and songwriter Mick Hucknall, who by the time the band initially disbanded in 2010 was the only original member left. Since the release of their debut album Picture Book in 1985, they've had 10 songs reach top 10 in the UK singles chart, including Holding Back the Years and If You Don't Know Me By Now, both of which reached number 1 in the US Billboard Hot 100. They have 5 number 1 albums in the UK, with their 1991 album Stars being one of the best-selling albums in UK chart history. At the 1992 and 1993 Brit Awards, they received the award for Best British Group and received 3 Grammy Award nominations for the Best New Artist in 1987, Holding Back the Years, and If You Don't Know Me By Now, for the Best Pop Performance by a Duo or a Group with Vocals. The band reformed in 2015. Simply Red has sold over 50 million albums. The current members are Mick Hucknall on lead vocals, Ian Kerricombe on saxophone, he's on the keyboards as well, Steve Lewison on bass and backing vocals, Kenji Suzaki on guitars and backing vocals, Kevin Robinson on trumpet, flugelhorn, percussion and backing vocals, Dave Clayton on keyboards, Roman Roth on drums and backing vocals. And the former members are Fritz McIntyre on keyboards and vocals. He was in there 1985 to 1996 and he died in 2021. Tim Kellett on the trumpet, flugelhorn, keyboards and backing vocals. He was in the band from 1985 to 1994. Tony Bowers on bass from 1985 to 1991. Chris Joyce on drums and percussion in 1985 to 1991. David Fryman on guitars in 1985. Sullivan Richardson on guitars in 1985 to 1987. Aziz Ibrahim on guitars 1987 to 1988. Hector Perrier on guitars 1988 to 1996. Gokta Yakashi on drums and percussion 1991 to 1995. He had a break and came back from 1997 to 2003. Sean Ward on bass, backing vocals from 1991 to 1994. Dee Johnson on backing vocals in 1991 to 2008. Valerie Bailey on drums in 1995 to 1998. Sarah Brown backing vocals 1995 to 2008. Tim Vine on keyboards and bass 1996 to 1999. John Johnson on trombone and percussion 1998 through to 2008, and he died in 2017. Mark James on guitars in 1998 to 2003. Wayne Stobbart on bass in 1998 to 2002. Chris DeMargery on saxophone and flute 1998 to 2008, and Andy Wright on keyboards and bass 1998 to 2002. Then you had Pete Lewison on drums from 2003 to 2010. There's a lot of former members. Right, so here's their discography. So you've got listed as their studio albums: Picture Book in 1985, Men and Women in 1987, A New Flame in 1989, Stars in 1991, Life in 1995, Blue in 1998, Love and the Russian Winter in 1999, Home in 2003, Simplified in 2005, Stay in 2007, Big Love in 2015, Blue Eyed Soul in 2019. So a nice tidy set of albums, and there's also a solo discography for Mick Hucknall. So you had Tribute to Bobby in 2008, then you had 2012 American Soul, and his singles were in 2008 Poverty and Farther Up the Road, 2011 Happy This Christmas, 2012 That's How Strong My Love Is. So that's a nice little bit of background on Simply Red. After the break we're going to come back with the supporting artist Micah Paris. We'll be back after this. 30 Years Since is a sci-fi story podcast which is full of dramatical moments and a bit of gratuitous violence. The first series was originally done in first person, so the character's just telling a monologue, and then the second series and onwards became more third person, so it was more of an in-depth story, and you have all the characters actually interacting with each other. Great set of sci-fi stories. So 30 years after an alien invasion, which the humans lost, and the first story arc is now over, though we've got plenty more story arcs left to tell from the land of 30 years since. So why not check it out? The links are in the description below. And we're back. So Michelle Antoinette Wallen, MBE, born 27th of April in 1969, is professionally known as Micah Paris. As an English singer, presenter and actress. She was born in Islington in North London, but moved to Brockley, South London when she was 9. Paris released her debut album So Good in 1988, which spawned singles including My One Temptation and Where Is the Love. She has since gone on to release 7 further albums: Contribution in 1990, Whisper a Prayer in 1993, Black Angel in 1998, If You Could Love Me in 2005, Soul Classics in 2005, Born Again in 2009, and Gospel in 2020. And in 2020, Paris was cast in the BBC soap opera EastEnders as Ellie Nixon. Paris grew up singing in her grandparents' church, and by her mid-teens was making regular appearances with the Spirit of Watts Gospel Choir, with whom she featured on the 1985 EP Gospel Joy. At the age of 17, she became a backing vocalist with the UK band Hollywood Beyond. Paris appeared on their album If in 1985. In 1988, she released her debut platinum-selling album So Good, with Fall from Broadway when she was 19 years old. My One Temptation was the lead single. This led to a collaboration with American soul singer Will Downing on a cover version of the classic Where Is the Love, made famous by Donny Hathaway and Roberta Flack in the early 1970s. The follow-up album Contribution was released in 1990. This extended Paris' soul and gospel influences to bring in hip-hop and house music, and featured the track If I Love You Tonight, written by Prince and recorded at his Paisley Park studios with Omer Lyfok, a classically trained musician. Paris recorded I Should Have Known Better in 1990. It was issued on the B-side to South of the River. Paris also recorded with Anita Barker, Bonnie Raitt and Natalie Cole on the album Nelson Mandela, an international tribute for a free South Africa in 1990, and provided the title track to Isaac Julian's Young Soul Rebels movie soundtrack the following year. She worked with the saxophonist Courtney Pine, Redemption Song in 1992, the Stereo MCs Don't Let Up in 1992, and Bobby Womack, I Wish I'd Never Met You in 1991. Her third album was Whisper a Prayer in 1993, which included the singles I Never Felt Like This Before and I Wanna Hold On To You, as well as Put a Move on My Heart, which was later recorded by Tamia in 1995 on Quincy Jones's Q Jock Joint album. This followed by more collaboration work on the album tracks with Guru on his Jazzmaster 2, Looking Through Darkness in 1995, Mark Morrison Years For You in 1996, and Maxwell Mantra in 1996. Paris released the album Black Angel on Chrysalis in 1998. It contained a cover version of U2's One and a duet with James Ingram. Black Angel produced 2 more top 20 singles in Stay and Carefree. More collaborations followed with Omar, Confection in 1994, Max Beasley with Higher Vibes in 1994, Subversive, Police and Thieves in 1998, the Mobo All-Stars compilation album in 1998, Mr. X 1 Million Smiles in 1998, Prince Just My Imagination in 2000, and Boy George I Could Be Someone in 2000. A collaboration with David Gilmour and Jules Holland on Screaming Jay Hawkins' track I Put a Spell on You followed in 2001. The trio had regrouped on occasions to perform the hit. 2 years later, Paris lent her voice to Walt Disney Pictures' Touchstone Pictures soundtrack for High Hills and Lowlives, which was later included in the Primal Screen soundtrack compilation album 2001. In 2003, Paris released the Moby sampling Heart with Separum Suite. Paris also joined Omar on stage for his gig at the Shepherd's Bush Empire. She also contributed to the track I Don't Understand on Milk and Sugar album. 2004 saw Paris feature as a guest on the new Inspirational Choirs album Inspirations, along with Keisha White and Jocelyn Brown. In 2005, Paris released the album If You Could Love Me on Winded Bird Records, featuring backing from the Breaker Brothers on the title track with executive producer Andreas Newman and producer Bernard Grobman. Also in 2005, she released the album Soul Classics with executive producers Rick Blasky and Andreas Newman. Paris collaborated with Lamar on the track Can't See You on his album The Truth About Love in 2006, and in February 2008 she released the duet Secret Lovers with Alexandria O'Neill. This was followed by a residency at the Indigo O2. In June 2009 she released her 6th studio album Born Again. She embarked on a nationwide tour which included dates at the Jazz Cafe in February 2009 to showcase the material. The album was produced by Brian Rawling. James Morrison rates Paris' first single Baby Come Back Now. Paris released the single Born Again on the 17th of August 2009. The track The Hardest Thing was remixed by Stonebridge Almighty and Too Dark. Paris performed at various venues prior to the release of the album in March 2010 of the title track Born Again. Right, so here's her discography. So Good in 1988, Contribution in 1990, Whisper a Prayer in 1993, Black Angel in 1998, If You Could Love Me in 2005, Soul Classics in 2005, Born Again in 2009 and Gospel in 2020. Now we've had a bit of background on Micah Paris. Let's take another look at the show. We'll be back after this. The name's Vert, Percival Reginald Vert, and I run the PR-Vert detective agency. The year is 2055 and the police have been defunded. So if you need a police investigation, the police will charge you 1,000 big ones a day. Because of this, the government introduced the P.I Act, where the private investigators can undercut the police so justice can become affordable. These are my case files. Percival Vert is no hero. He is a low-life scumbag and the full embodiment of how not to be a man. He cheats his way into getting work, he objectifies women, and is quite a disgusting human being, if you can even call him that. Gumshoe is intended to poke fun at everyone that takes life too seriously and directly towel whips the modern day Puritans in the balls because they've forgotten the fact that when something isn't funny in real life, it's probably hilarious in the land of fiction. Come and listen to Gumshoe every Wednesday. The links are in the description below. And we're back. So I'm going to talk about Micah Paris's performance, and damn, I've never heard her before, and I am so impressed with that performance. Such an awesome performance. Right, so Mike had the full silk backdrops, which were illuminated by a bank of LED pin spots at the top and some LED washers at the bottom. So when the colours merged, they merged seamlessly. A nice piece of programming and focusing that is, it would have to be perfect, because that's how I could describe it. That's the only way I could describe it, as being absolutely flawless in colour and illumination. Throughout the whole of her performance, it was one colour, which was Congo blue. She didn't have any other colour on stage or have any of the moving head giving any gobo breakups. It was just the one Congo blue wash with a bit of face light from LX, well, from the front of house bar. So nice, simple and effective. And what I did notice, which no one else would, I suppose you've got to have the trained eye for it, you could see the muted projector bouncing around a little bit on the backdrop. And what I mean by that is the projector, which is front of house, as it was reacting with the vibrations from the bass, you could see slight distortions, because even though the image is muted, it still emits a bit of light, which you wouldn't really notice unless you got that trained eye. So when I say the image is muted, it's essentially the a black background. So it's just showing a very small amount of light, and as the projector bounced around with a bit of bass from Micah's show, you could see a nice little bit of distortion. And the only way I can describe it is if you used to watch Star Trek in the good old days, as in the original series, and even to a degree Star Trek The Next Generation, showing my age and my geekiness, you'll see the outline of the Klingon bird of prey where it was cloaked, and you needed good eyesight to see it even on TV then, but you'd see a slight distortion. And although the cast would only just make it out. But anyways, I digress. And that's the kind of distortion that I noticed on the backdrop from the projector as it was bouncing around. So I knew it was there because I knew the projector was there, and also I could see the little distortion on the back screens, although most people probably wouldn't see that distortion. Nice bit of theory there, and a nice analogy. Anyways, I'll continue. I've digressed a bit too much. So Micah and her band were all centre stage, well, down centre stage. So you had the riser that Simply Red were based on, and they were just in front of that. So for the length of the riser and just in front of that riser to the front of the stage was a nice little compact square. So they essentially had 1/5 of the entire stage. They weren't too claustrophobically bunched together, but it was tight though. But visually it looked good. But visually it was very good, I have to say. So yeah, not claustrophobically tight, but nicely spaced, but tight as well. What I did notice is normally the main set would be either be covered by a backdrop or a kabuki, and if they didn't have that, they'd drape over the instruments and the risers and whatnot to keep it top secret. But not Simply Red, no, they wanted you to see it. It was an open preset, so all their instruments were set so everyone could see them purposely behind Micah Paris's band. Now, with Micah's actual performance, she was full of charisma. I mean, she owned that stage. That stage that belonged to Simply Red belonged to her first, and she made that known. She made it known that she belonged on that stage, and it was very reminiscent of something. At first I couldn't put my finger on it, and then it just dawned on me. She had the same charisma and stage presence like Tina Turner, with mannerisms, dance moves, and just the full embodiment of enjoying that show. And I'm not saying that she was doing a Tina Turner impression, because she wasn't. She was being herself, but she had those traits of how Tina Turner would do things. So it was more of an inspiration. She was inspired by Tina Turner in that style of how she would perform, which isn't exactly unique, but it was very, very much full of her own personality as well, and it came across really, really well. So much energy from this performance, so much vibrancy within her voice, and oh my god, her voice was amazing. And as I said earlier on, this is the first time I heard Micah Paris. I've never heard of her before, because normally it's not my kind of genre. Although I would listen to all kinds of music, and I used to work on a lot of soul shows when I worked at sea, because soul is very popular. It always will be popular in my opinion, and those kind of songs will never die. And from her vocals, damn, they're very, very spine-tinglingly impressive, and I was absolutely honoured to actually see that show. I was very, very honoured to see it. Sound wise, it was absolutely flawless. You had 22 carat clarity, The band were perfectly balanced. You could hear every aspect of it very crystal clear, and it came across really well. It was perfectly mixed, and then on top of the instruments, the vocals are perfect. The backing vocals are mixed perfectly, and when I say mixed, it was blended in very well, and it didn't sound karaoke. It sounded in equivalence of, which was absolutely perfect. It was definitely CD quality sound, and the sound engineer should give himself a pat on the back because he had a stroke of genius. A tribute to men that hate their jobs is a brutal but witty portrayal of working a job you hate. In this podcast, there are themes explored in which happy workers simply wouldn't understand unless they listen to these cautionary tales from a man that lost his ideal job because of the global pandemic. Be warned that this podcast contains strong, offensive language that some listeners may not want to hear. In addition, this podcast is definitely not recommended for younger audiences. The links for this is in the description below. And we're back. So, Simply Red. They came on to yet again the Congo Blue look. It was a very dark, dim version of the Congo Blue, and the band walked onto a massive roaring applause. I mean, proper roaring applause. And once I was in position, they started up, and then as the vocals started, Mick Hucknall walked on stage. So he essentially started in the stage right wing and entered as soon as his vocals started. Nice way to start a show, I have to say. Very nice way to start a show. Nice, chilled, relaxed entrance. Now, the lighting states for the first 7 songs were basic. I mean, proper basic. Now, why were they basic? I mean, after all, they had a lot of lights in the air, which they didn't seem to use that much at the start. They basically had the same kind of lighting style as Micah Paris did on her set, but there was a reason for this. Where they were front projecting the images onto the 4 drop-down silks, it's because the projector, they're afraid of it bleeding out. When I say bleeding out, the lights were definitely more powerful than the projector that they had. So if they had all these lighting effects, you just wouldn't see the images on the screen. Hence why they dialed it down a little bit whilst the screens were running. On the 7th song, the 4 silks dropped because they were actually part of a kabuki system, which I didn't even know until it happened. The next part of the set, which was built before I got in and covered up by the kabuki drapes, it revealed 4 ladder trusses going from the grid down to the bottom of the stage, which was full of moving head LED lights, as well as some LED floods, which were mappable. So you had 5 large pixels deep and 5 large pixels wide in a square, and every individual pixel could work individually or as a whole. So when it's as a whole, it will act like a floodlight, but individually you could program and map chases and sequences, and even if you had enough of them, which they had, you could actually chart an image, which if you're up close you wouldn't be able to tell what the image was, but if you were right at the back of the audience you would, because you'd have enough of the screen resolution and depth to be able to see what shapes are being generated. And there were some shapes being generated throughout the show, which I thought was a nice touch. You definitely could tell that the programmer of that desk knew exactly what he was doing and programmed it very well. So there were some subtle intricacies within those LED units. Because the silks had dropped and they were no longer projecting the image from the projector, you had all the moving heads give out all these lovely gobo break-up lighting patterns, as well as those LED flood units. So you had lots of different shapes, and it looked beautiful. It was done subtly, and there was no flash and trash. You had a little bit of flashing, but that was only because it was in time with the music. It wasn't over the top. It was all complimentary rather than in your face, which was really, really good. And most of the lighting effects, the shapes were pretty much the same. And what I say that by that is the moving lights were in the same position for most of the songs. They just changed the gobos, or changed the colours, or changed both the colours and the gobos. Then they'd pan it out into the audience depending on what song it is, and then they'd revert back to how they were. So they kept it very, very simple, but very and highly effective, and it worked really, really well. Now, sound-wise, just like the support mic of Paris, the sound had 22 carat clarity, and I love that expression. I came up with it earlier on this afternoon during sound check, and I'm going to use that from now on. So when you have high clarity within the instruments and the vocals and the backing vocals, where it just mixes beautifully, and along with that 22 carat clarity, the sound was just not overpowering at all. It was actually one of the quietest shows I've had ever in this arena. I mean, ever. From the size of the sound system as well, I was actually quite surprised how quiet it was. And even though it was quiet, it was still impactful. It was mixed beautifully, and you could hear absolutely everything perfectly. So on average, it was about 93 decibels in the C unit, and I noticed that it maxed out at 101 decibels on the C unit as well. So that's pretty good. I mean, it's pretty quiet. And when I recorded the maximum, that was when I was in the pit, directly in line with the bottom of the line arrays where the sound bounces down. So that's the loudest point within the whole arena. Obviously mirrored with stage left and stage right. So you're not going to get any louder than in the field of the line arrays. But yes, 101 decibels on the C unit is pretty quiet compared to what we normally get. So well done to the sound engineer, well done. And as for the band, you could tell they loved being on that stage. You could feel in the music they were playing that they had a lot of feeling within that music, and it was a joy to watch. It was really pleasant to see this. It really, really was. It made part of the show how they were just enjoying themselves on stage, which is the way it should be. I mean, genuinely, that is the way how it should be. And even Mick Hucknall made a comment about the COVID situation, where the show got cancelled for 2 weeks because the whole band went down with COVID, apart from one, and that was the bassist. He was just being complimented, and he got the nickname from the rest of the band as Superman because he didn't catch COVID at all. Everyone else got tested positive. Everyone else was sick from it. Mick Hucknall mostly, apparently, and you had the bass player just like, yep, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong with me. Well done with Mr. Super Immunity there. Right, so I digress. So getting back to it, Mick Hucknall, well, his voice, physically Mick Hucknall has aged, but his voice, wow, his voice hasn't aged at all. If you close your eyes, you'd hear Mick Hucknall from the 1980s, well, 1988 to be more precise, and the same quality through the 90s. So I could just hear Mick Hucknall from how I grew up with, from being a young lad, and his vocal ability has not changed. He's not lost anything, and he's just as powerful. He has just as powerful a voice as he always has done, with perfect pitch control. Absolutely superb. It's not often that you get that with an older artist, especially when you've heard them from when they were younger all the way up to them now today. Because if you think of it this way, when he started out in 1988, I was a 5-year-old. I was 5 in 1988. And his vocal ability has just not changed. He's not lost anything, and he's retained all that vocal ability. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant to hear. Right, so I actually got a set list in my hand. It's not often that I'm granted a set list these days, because people like to keep the sets as very top secret as possible. But here it is. Obviously, from venue to venue, it will change because they like to break things up and moving it around and whatnot, so they don't get bored. But today's running order was Home, then Over, Never Never Love, Brand New, For Your Babies, Holding, Enough, A New Flame, and that's where the 4 Silk Kabukis dropped, Your Mirror, Night Nurse, Fake, Thrill Me, It's Only Love, Come to My Aid, Stars, Sunrise, Something Got Me Started, and they finished off with Fairground. But did they actually finish off? No, because everyone does an encore, and yeah, the 3-song encore. So what songs do you reckon I've missed out? What songs do you think he should have played? Well, I'll tell you what, it was Money, Ain't That a Lot of Love, and If You Don't Know Me By Now. So those were his 3 encore songs, and on his encore he had a massive round of applause to get him back on the stage. And I have to say, the wait between going off and coming back on was a little bit longer than usual, but then again, this is Mick Hucknall and Simply Red. They can do whatever they want because it's Mick Hucknall and Simply Red, and you know that they're going to come back on, you know. And also, I would also think that just recovering from COVID, he might still have a little bit of sore in his throat and probably needed a drink. I say a drink. He probably necked a whole bottle of water or something, and then he come back on to a massive round of applause. So, and then as he started singing Money, everyone got to their feet. Some people were dancing on the chairs, which is a big no-no in the arena. You're not supposed to do that, in case you fall through the chair and hurt yourself. And if you do, you get eaten by a chair, then you can't claim on insurance because there are warnings saying do not stand on chairs. But anyways, I digress. There was everyone pulling out their phones, swaying, singing along and dancing to Money, Ain't That a Lot of Love, and everyone, and I mean everyone, sang to If You Don't Know Me By Now. And he thanked the audience, gave a massive bow, and left the stage to a massive round of applause. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please hit like, subscribe and share. And if you haven't already done so, why not check out more content from Master X Media by visiting our website, which is www.masterxmedia.info. And we will catch you next time. Bye for now.